God, what a build-up that is. That's something to live up to. Today I've been listening to the speakers and they are brilliant, but as you can see, I'm not doing much with technology. I'd rather talk to you guys in the way that I do it. So I'd have to go back in time because, as Bill kindly pointed out, I am history, or part of history, and I can remember the start of the 60s fashion revolution. And one of the things I tell students these days is that it was my generation who changed the world. We did it. And I was there. The first designers we ever took in were Ozzy Clark and Mary Quant. So I have seen designer wear change over a period of 50 years. And the digital world, yeah, we're in it. So first of all, we started with the Mary Quants and the Ozzy Clarks. And they were new, very new young designers at the absolute start of this revolution. As time went on, you got the magazines like Vogue and Harper's had a merchandise department. And that merchandise department, their job was to find the stores around the country that would be stocking Mary Quant or Ozzy Clark. And you also had the advertising department, and then you had the editorial department. And I remember speaking to one woman from Vogue who said, God forbid the advertising department ever tries to influence the editorial department. Now that scene has changed dramatically. You pick up any glossy magazine nowadays and all you get in the editorial department, editorials are the big boys, the big brands, like the Burberrys and the Dior and so on and so forth. In my opinion, and some of the things I say today might be slightly controversial, but in my opinion, that is killing off innovation in our young designers because they don't get any editorial at all in any of the magazines. If we go back to what we saw then, I started with Ozzy Clark and Mary Quant, and then in the 80s, we had another wave of revolution. We had the avant-garde designers came through, and they in the main were Japanese. I always remember one quote in one newspaper saying that Comme des Garçons, that Rei Kawakubo, the new black was red. And that was typical. But it was such an incredibly innovative and exciting time to be around with these fabulous designers. And that was when Polly, which was my baby, really took off. Because everybody in the provinces wanted to stock the really safe designers. I knew if we were in Barnsley, we had to go that extra mile. We had to give people what they couldn't get in Leeds and Sheffield and Bradford and any of the northern cities. And at one point in the history of this store, we were the only shop in the whole of this country that had all three of the avant-garde Japanese designers under one roof. And we had people travel from all over the country to come to us. Then, of course, you've got to be very careful because then you've got the digital age coming in. First of all, what we had that made Barnsley great, we're almost a history of the town that I was born in. In the beginning, all our clients, 90-odd% of them, were from my town. Because we had a strong mining industry, we had strong industry, and they would spend their money. So in the beginning, we were a social history of the town that I lived in. Then another page turns over because a few years ago, the Russians and the Chinese came into the market in a big way. They were incredibly wealthy. We were dealing then with a company called, amongst a lot of other companies, a company called Lanvin. Their designer was called Albert, and I used to go in there a bit like those guys who came up from London with my heart pounding because it was so fabulous. The Chinese and the Russians came into the market, and I watched the innovation of that designer get less and less every time I went into that showroom, to the degree I said to my assistant one day, within 10 years, this is going to change totally out of recognition. It did, and they got rid of Albert. They gave him the push. What they had done was tried to accommodate the Russian and the Chinese market. And that then altered the whole finance of how we dealt. Because a lot of the time, when they came to deliver the goods to some shop in China whose dad was going to open it for this young bloke. So what happened then was that the finance changed, because these companies started saying to the buyers, maybe not to Selfridge, maybe not to Harrods, and maybe not to Inequality, but the small buyers like us, the small and medium-sized ones, you went in there, and the first thing you did as you place your order, you had to put down a 30% deposit. Because if the Chinese and the Russians didn't take it, it didn't matter, because they'd covered their manufacturing costs. But it became very, very difficult for small businesses and medium-sized businesses to meet that commitment 6 months before they were going to get those goods in. So the pressure was really, really on. And then, as if it was a bolt out of the blue, the decision I made was that there would never, ever be any discount on Nomad, to the degree that my sister-in-law pays full money for it when she comes in at Christmas to buy from me. So we've got an old following of our own clients who love what we do. I've got into a new business now, which is manufacturing and textiles. And what I found is that I'm actually loving this far more than ever I did sitting on the front row seats in Paris and all the bitching and backbiting that went on in my industry. And when I go now to companies like Joshua Ellis, and because we use a lot of their cashmeres, well, a lot for us, I'm in seventh heaven. And when I go to Premier Vision, which is a textile exhibition in Paris, I never leave the airport, and I'm in seventh heaven. I absolutely love what I am doing now. If I go back again to technology, because I feel that what we have created is an arts and crafts movement in where we've got the digital world now. 100 years ago, it was the mass manufacturing. What I have seen from the digital world and what's happening with designers now, except for, of course, Christopher Burberry, but everybody else, they have tailored what they are making to the Chinese and the Russian market, which means that the clothing which is being produced in the main is what we have termed as tits and glitz. So there is a great influence of those emerging markets on design, which I forecast 15 years ago. So I think there is a model here with what I'm doing, for getting rid of the... If I look at what happens on the digital side of it, there are certain psychological things here which are happening with shopping, and I'm not sure that they are a good thing. I have got a great working relationship with the DHL driver. Always make him a cup of coffee if it's cold and give him a cold drink if it's hot, because he will look out for parcels that are coming in to us and make sure we get them. He tells us that 9 out of 10 of the parcels that are delivered through the digital shopping, 9 out of 10 are taken back. There's a certain company, and I don't look at all the finance of all the companies, but a certain company that's been around for a long time now, doing only internet shopping, that has consistently lost £10 million a year over the last 10 years. So I am not, I think, yes, there is a market for it. I am sure there is. But I think there's got to be something else other than the digital market. There has to be, because they're all fighting for the same market. I had a guy talking to me the other day who had bought a new pair of shoes on the internet. There's two things happening now. One is that psychologically, when a woman takes a parcel in from internet shopping, I think that 9 times out of 10, by the time she's opened it, by the time she's tried it on in her bedroom, and by the time she's owned it for a week, she's bored with it, goes back in the box and back out again. The other thing about this is that because we have to see everything before it's there. So the magazines now, the glossy magazines, if you go out and buy the July magazines now of Vogue, they've already got the winter collections in. And what's happening, they'll see them on the screen, they'll see them in the magazines, and women will be bored stiff by that garment by the time it gets onto the shop floor. So we have to somehow cut down this time lapse, and I do believe that Burberry are addressing that problem. So we do know that there is a problem there. So that, in my opinion, there are lots of problems with internet at the moment, and I can only see them growing. I don't know the answers, I'm afraid. I wish I did, but we're getting more and more small and medium-sized businesses going to the wall. I'm not sure that that is a good thing. It kills innovation. The magazines are no longer showing young, innovative designers. They're only showing the big boys. The big boys are in all after the same market, which is the Arab market, the Russian market, the Chinese market. So everybody is after the same market. And what we get, 10 years ago, there were 20,000 women who bought couture. That now has shrunk to 2,000 women who buy couture. In order to bridge that gap, what the stores have done, what the big designers have done, like Dior, like YSL, who have lost their designers, they've all walked. What they have done to bridge that gap is they've designed a collection which is more and more expensive and hits that middle market. So we are getting a great big divide in the fashion world. I don't know what the answer is, and I'm certainly not going to be around for the next 50 years to tell you all exactly how this pans out, how it turns out. But I don't believe fully in everything that I've heard today. But I hope that we all succeed in our own way, and thank you very much.
I have no real capacity to answer this question of emergent trends, which is the issue I'm supposed to speak about. I must confess that I have no crystal ball and therefore no vision as such. However, I'm, as you are, I have interrogations, emotions, memory, feelings. I have nightmares and dreams. And I have interrogation to share with you. Lost in transition is really lost in translation. There is an error there, a mistake, because my English is poor, as you noticed. So the words, you can read them by yourself. The idea for me is to understand. I understand the question of emerging and emergent trends as a question of mindset. I would like to build with you a common understanding and vision of change of mindsets. And my question is from where we are to present times. So what can we, well, it's arbitrary. I started with World War II because it's something that we have as a emotional, cultural, historical heritage. And what I would like is that you do the same. Add your own words corresponding to your own life, your own experience, your own memory, your own country, your own community, just to give a picture of your emotional background and understanding your environment. Here, some points that I can insist on, for instance, is birth control. Why? Because in 3 centuries, if we ask ourselves on what was significant in the 20th century, it won't be technology, because technology we had since a long time. But changing fatality of birth into control of birth is, anthropologically, a complete transformation of the type of life we have. Well, I guess that if I say World War II, you know what it is. Concentration camps, you know what it is. Hiroshima, you know what it is. Decolonization, Vietnam War. I mean, it's a lot of things we have in our experience, references we got. And at that time, in fact, if I try to get a global image of that time, I would say that we were in a social compromise that was acceptable. There were economic development. Of course, we went to a consumer society, and this consumer society also engaged some negative reaction from the youth. And remember that the youth is a concept which is made with the baby boomers. Before, there were young people, but after, we had the youth as a category. We experienced transformation, and the transformation was the internationalization, the globalization, the global economy. And if you remember the fall of the Berlin Wall and the theory of Fukuyama, the end of history, a seamless capitalism over the planet. And this was concomitant to what we can call a greedy capitalism, which had good and bad consequences. That is, decreasing of poverty in the rest of the world, and in our world, growing inequality. Okay, the real things that are emerging in this second image of our story is certainly the discovery of the negative externalities. Climate change was coming, but we were just talking in the 70s of pollution. We knew that by the Rome Club that we had a problem with growth, we had a problem with resources, we had a problem with progress as such, and progress was not bearing the same promise that before. So there is a turning point which you can characterize. I will characterize them, but you have your own reference, and I'm interested if you can put your own reference here. So this was really strong in terms of political, economical, social responsibility. And the second contribution, intellectual contribution that I consider is the consequences of modernity of Anthony Giddens. Because Giddens was studying the fact that notion like democracy was coming inside the family. The relationship you had with your children were changed because they had a voice. And this transformation on the basic structure, basic shell, was exported to other environment-like companies where the hierarchical structure was questioned by all the people that were involved in it. It's difficult to produce, it's difficult to sell, etc., because the environment doesn't help you to do so. And they are a solution, and a solution because first they can produce intelligently, they can be respectful of people, they can be respectful of their environment, they can be they can also provide social utility in many ways. In front of that, you have seen emerged a construction of fear culture. Fear culture, you see it in two main directions. One is clash of civilization, which is a point of view of Mr. Huntington. And we can ask ourselves if this clash of civilization is not. And the second vision we can have on terrorism is the terrorism of stock exchange. Because in 2008, we had a wonderful collapse of the stock exchange system, and we are paying for that. And today we are said, do not move. Do not move. If you move, it will be worst. And this is a very difficult situation. But it's okay. We can say that this is, in fact, the old world. It is the world of yesterday. It's not today's world. We have to consider a shift, which is a shift in population. That is the environment. And the environment is made by the young people, the youth. And they belong to another world. They have other references. They have other vision. They do not live in the same planet as we do. It is just a spaceship Earth. And this change totally the perspective they are in. They perceive responsibility, interdependence. They are fed up with hierarchy. They demonstrate more interest in empathy, or at least in well-understood interest. They work with models of collective intelligence. They are looking for equity, that is fairness, not equity in market. Social justice. There is all over Europe a discussion on universal income. They are looking for open innovation, for reciprocity, cooperation. I mean, they have a lot of interrogation that were not the one we had 30 years ago or even 20 years ago. They do not expect from any people to give them the solution. They want to produce it themselves. And this is why I said the issue is co-design, because we need to produce collectively our representation. We need to organize in order to give more voice to the young people. We have certainly to coach them. If you remember Jack Welch of General Electric, in 2000, what he did is he took young people, 20 years old, and he doubled everybody in the top management of General Electric by a young girl or young guy, 20 years. All the top managers were doubled by someone young. And all the people were obliged to revise their own process, and the young were asking, could you do, you can do elsewhere, you can do another way, you can do, etc. I use this is a long quotation. I invite you to read it. What I would say on this quotation is that the main error we have done is to consider economic success as an objective. Economic success is a result. And what produces economic success is social creativity. That is, the capacity you have to invent, to imagine, to desire, etc. And it's your desire which will enable us to have new activities. It's certainly not your spreadsheet.